Hello, everybody. Welcome to another training, learning, and development community playlist. This one is the accessibility playlist. Thanks for coming in this afternoon. We've already got some people in the room. Let me say hi to some live folks. Toddy, Greg, Stephanie, Roger, Stephen, and Dimashaya, or I could never remember how to pronounce your name. You're going to have to email me that. Thanks for coming in, Amy. Glad that you're here today. So this is the accessibility playlist, and this is going to be our first session in the series. We're going to be doing this all through the month of May, and I am so glad that we have our first guest is Susan Nabonne Beck, who's going to be talking about Storyline 360 and accessibility. So thanks for coming in, everybody. Susan, thanks so much for being here. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? You're somebody that's kind of relatively new to what we do in our community, so I'd love to hear more about it.
Thank you so much, and thank you for allowing me to be here. I am very new to the community, something I just learned about, but I have been in this industry my entire career. Started thinking I wanted to be a classroom teacher, very quickly determined that I do not want to be a classroom teacher, and transitioned into instructional design and development. So this is my passion, and again, done it my entire career with truly a focus on e-learning. I think that e-learning has its place in just about everything. Fell upon accessibility by chance, and I'm here to learn to share, some of what I have learned the hard way with you in the community, so that they do not have to learn the hard way like I did.
I love it. And thank you so much for doing this. You came highly recommended by Christy Tucker, who kind of introduced you to us. And so I'm going to have to give her the shout out. Thanks again, Christy, for introducing us to Susan. And with that, Susan, is it okay if I'm going to go ahead and just minimize my window and mute my audio?
You bet.
And let you take it away.
Thank you so much.
Okay, awesome.
So I'll go ahead and share what I have set up for us. And it's coming up. I hope it's a beautiful day where everyone is. I have to say, here in Northern California, it is a pristine, pristine day. It is absolutely gorgeous, cannot complain. And let's see. Don't we always love when we have technical difficulties? And there we are. Wonderful. As we mentioned, today we're going to be talking about some storyline accessibility tips. I'm Susan Nabonne Beck, and if you ever want to reach out and chat about accessibility, I am happy to talk about it, or anything storyline for that matter. It's definitely one of my passions, and I do really love sharing what I know with others. So why are we here? First of all, what are we going to be talking about, and what are we going to focus on? Number one, this conversation is all about Storyline 360 along with JAWS Screen Reader. I'm completely aware that there's many different versions of Storyline that the industry is currently using. I still work with people that are using Storyline 2, and that's just fine. But this particular conversation, we're going to be focusing primarily on solely on Storyline 360. I can't say that these solutions and tips and tricks that I'm speaking to can't be used in desktop versions, but you would have to give them a try and test them out yourselves.
Hey, Susan, just real quick.
You bet.
Your share popped up for a second, but then it disappeared. So you might want to try that one more time. Yeah,
thank you.
Sure, no problem.
Let's try that one more time. So I'm guessing you can see me now. That's good. So let's go into share. And sure enough, my PowerPoint keeps disappearing. Very strange. Very, very strange. I might have to switch to my screen instead of the application. Let's see if that'll work for us.
Yeah, that definitely works sometimes. There we go. We can see both
Can
of
you
you.
see it now?
Yeah, we can see you and the share.
You can. Wonderful, I think. So if the screen gets too small, just let me know and we'll try to figure something out. But what I was speaking to the fact that I'm really going to be focusing on just those two particular items, Storyline 360 and JAWS Screen Reader. NVDA is also a screen reader that works with Storyline. I am familiar with it, but my specialty is mostly in the JAWS Screen Reader, just simply because most of my clients use that screen reader. These tips and tricks come from my lessons learned as well as a few of my colleagues. So I do try to pull in knowledge from anywhere I can get it and put it in my memory bank and share it as much as possible. These are really a bunch of workarounds and items discovered through a plethora of trial and error. I mentioned to you that I was thrown into accessibility by accident. I absolutely was. I was working for a client that did not have that as a need up front, but halfway through the project, they said, oh, this now has to be WCAG, which that's another conversation altogether, the types of compliance, but it needed to be AAA compliant. And I went, I know that's the highest there is, so what do I need to do? So I had to learn very quickly. What this is not is everything you need to know about Storyline 360 and accessibility. I wouldn't say it's the 50,000 foot level. We're probably at like 25,000 foot level. We can go much, much deeper, but that's definitely a different topic for a different day. And there's not only one way to arrive at a compliant product. This is not the only way, nor is it necessarily the best way, but it's what I find is the most streamlined, especially for rapid development. And then it's definitely not the be all end all. Articulate is Storyline is constantly being updated and they're making improvements. They listen to the community and they hear us say it needs to be easier to make accessible courses, especially when it comes to things like alt text and button states, which is very much our focus today. So we'll jump right in. So alt text, we've all heard of it. We think of it as what most of us think of it of what an image says or what we call an image in the quote unquote background. But simply put, it is not that simple. So, what is alt text when it comes to storyline? So if you think of storyline as a bunch of objects that we put on a screen that gets spit out and into this beautiful e-learning course, all of those objects have alt text. If it's there, there's alt text. So even a an object that you put on a screen for a graphic reason, I maybe want to put a nice little circle in the lower left-hand corner of my screen just to make something pop, that has alt text. So it's more than just images. In fact, a text block has alt text. Now you're thinking, okay, text block, that's pretty straightforward, right? Doesn't it just read what's in the text block? Yes, it does. Alt text is what is in the text block. However, that becomes problematic. And most importantly, what Storyline offers that is wonderful is that you can control the order for the most part that Storyline reads those items on the screen so that the alt text is read by the screen reader in a particular way. Now, that is a topic all in of itself. I'd love to come back and talk more about tab order. I will touch on it a little bit later, but just keep in mind that you can control, for the most part, when an item is read. So what exactly is a text block's alt text? We think of it like it will take the words that are in the text and put it in the alternate text. Absolutely, it will. On the screen, you'll see an image of what the storyline alt text or accessibility screen looks like in the alt text field. And the item that's selected here is the title of this course. Simply put, it's not that simple. Excuse me, the title of this lesson. Simply put, it's not that simple. And we see that right here in the alt text. Simply put, it's dash or M dash. It's not that simple. So if we think about the fact that, or if we think that it's actually done, over with, we don't have to do anything else, this is where we get tripped up in storyline. Why? Because a screen reader actually will read exactly what you see on in the alt text field, including non quote unquote basic punctuations such as a period, a comma, or a question mark. So in the case that we're looking at here, there is an M dash, or the N dash, excuse me. Simply put, N dash, it is not that simple. The screen reader will read it just like that. So punctuation does not play well in the sandbox with others in this case. You want to now edit this alt text to remove any more advanced, let's call it, punctuation. And here's my first tip. Notepad is your friend. A lot of us do use it in programming. Us old school programmers use it all the time because we were writing HTML code in Notepad and then pulling it over. But Notepad is your friend. Why? Because it'll allow you, especially when you have a huge block of text, to pull it into a place that is not just one line like Storyline offers. If I had several lines here, I'd have to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. Excuse me. And I'm scrolling and it's going. Sorry about that.
Hey, Susan, real
Yeah.
quick request. Is there any way that you can minimize your video so that we can have the presentation full screen? All you have to do is just go mouse over kind of towards the top of your video image and then just turn off the screen and it'll make the presentation take up the full screen. Paul just wanted to be able to see a little better.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Oh,
Yeah.
no problem at all. And I appreciate your patience as this is my first time here. So I'm learning the tools as well.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm scrolling over my video image
and then if you just see the little camera symbol, if you just click on that, it'll there you go. So now you're minimizing. We just need you to get back to sharing your window again.
You bet. Okay, coming back to sharing my window.
Thank you. And thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate that. Can you see my window now? I don't think you can because it doesn't look like it's sharing again.
Yeah, I can't see it, not yet.
Okay. Could you help me get back to the sharing tools?
Sure, let's
I
see.
got it. I got it.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, is that my face again?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry,
Okay, one more
I
time.
actually did that. So.
Oh, okay. So let me first do this, and then I think I can do this. I think I got it this time.
There you go.
Share. And there.
There it is. Thank you.
Yay, we've done it.
Yeah.
Again, thanks for your patience. I was mentioning that Storyline has one little line for the alt text, and that is not, let's put that on the con list, if you will. So I utilize a notepad, always utilize the notepad to edit my alt text. copy and paste it either from the alt text window or from the text block itself, put it into Notepad, and then do the editing. So what am I editing for? I would edit for any advanced punctuation. In this case, if you look at the Notepad, I changed the en dash to a period. Simply put, period. It is not that simple. I would want to remove any numbers. So on the screen print, on the upper part of it, you'll see that this is actually lesson 1. I would change that 1 to the word 1 because it does not like numbers. It will often, in fact, not even read the number if it is followed by a period. Go figure. And I always leave the last punctuation mark off. Period, comma, question mark. It doesn't matter what it was going to be. I guess it wouldn't end with a comma, but I would leave that last punctuation mark off because JAWS often will read the final punctuation mark, period, as dot. It'll say dot. So I just by default leave it off. It does no one any harm. The screen reader doesn't go, oh, this is in a sentence. It just reads the words and continues. And then finally, I would edit out any abbreviations, if possible, or spell out any acronyms. And this is something that takes quite a bit of time. If you are, for example, doing leadership training, you're talking about one-on-ones, and you write it as 1:1s, that is exactly how the screen reader would read it, 1:1s. And you need to spell that out. It becomes one-on-ones. So I just want to take a moment and open it up to any questions you may have about, these things to avoid or to do with alt text for text blocks. Is there something I have to do on my side, or would they let you know if there's a question? Okay, so I don't think there's any questions there, so we'll move on. So the next thing are object and image alt text. So not the text blocks. Now we're getting into something maybe a little bit more familiar when it is an image on the screen or an object on the screen that I really want you to start thinking about how you can get beyond simply describing what it is. Yes, alt text is a way of explaining to the lower non-visual learner exactly what they are quote unquote seeing on the screen, or a visual learner would be seeing on the screen. But you can go well beyond that. For example, in this particular scenario that you're seeing on the screen there, you'll notice that there's a little mouse icon in the upper right. That was put there because we needed to add instruction for the non-visual learner of exactly what they should expect on the screen and how they will interact with it. So what we've done is we've taken an image that had mouse icon as the alt text and changed the alt text to the instruction. This slide is interactive. Select a button, then press the tab key to reveal more information. So think outside just describing to the learner what it looks like, but allow these instances of alt text to have you describe more to the learner of what they're expected to do. Now, here's the asterisk of that conversation. Always ask your accessibility tester, whoever is going to be if it's not you, if it's going to be an outside firm or the client that you're working with, bring these sort of things up in the design phase as possibilities to ensure that you're not putting time into something that won't be accepted. Again, there's some gray area with e-learning and accessibility. It does not match all the website accessibility standards. So testers are always happy. In what I've noticed, they're always happy to talk through solutions that can help the low or non-vision learner. And this is one of them. Like, how can we describe better what is more intuitive to a vision learner? And then here's a controversial statement. Do not add alt text to anything that doesn't contribute to the learning. So, I've had these conversations with colleagues. They say, well, then why is it on the screen to begin with? Why are you adding something that doesn't contribute to the learning? I'm going to go back to my statement about graphic design. You may add images, objects, things as simple as a divider line to your screen when it doesn't add any learning, doesn't have any impact to the learning. And it's not necessary to describe to the non-visual learner in order for them to get the most out of the course. So those are the things that you would remove. Or if you, those of us that kind of fake it till we make it sometime, and we may use an object to mask over a screen print or over an image, those items will have alt text. You have to get rid of those. Now, I guess it's worth mentioning that it's as simple as unchecking the object is visible to accessibility tools check mark right here within the accessibility window. But again, you have to really think about the cadence of what that screen reader, in this case JAWS, will read. What do we want someone who cannot see or has a low vision to hear? I went so far as to using a nighttime mask because I had a hard time keeping my eyes closed because I kept peeking. Using a nighttime mask to put it over my eyes to test it via JAWS. So I could actually picture what was going on, or better yet, have a colleague or someone on the project team do that because they're not as close to it. And if they can't picture what's going on, or if they have a hard time following the instructions, you might have to go back and tweak your design a little bit. All right. So moving on to the next topic, button states. This is the next biggest hurdle, if you will, that I encountered. So first it was just nailing down the cleanest way to do the alt text. Next it was trying to figure out how to tell the learner if they had clicked or not on something. And that is done through the object state. I was so excited a couple of releases back that Storyline 360 said that they now support button states for screen readers. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work. So, and it was like mid-project. It was a crazy, like 10 courses were all being developed at once. And we thought, yay, this has been solved. We installed it. And not only did it not work, it wiped out all of the custom programming we did. Thank goodness we knew to save a new version. All we did is go back in release as well as go back to the version of the course. But it made me realize that using the internal states, primarily the selected and visited states, may not be the best solution until Storyline gets it all worked out, which again, this is nothing against Storyline. It's still my favorite tool. As a company, I think they're wonderful, but they still are admittedly working on the accessibility piece. So I say customize for the win. Customize those states. Don't use the built-in ones. Yes, it takes some more programming. So you're going to be working with some more advanced triggers, but what it allows you to do is take control of the alt text for the different states. Where if you use the built-in states, it does not always read the alt text of those states. I don't know why. It just doesn't. And I've reported it many times to Storyline, and actually I work with their programmers, their engineers, just back and forth via email of things I find. So if you customize a state, in this case, I have a normal state, which is fine. That's a built-in state. Normal's no problem. Instead of having a selected state, I use on. It could be anything. It could be purple elephant. It doesn't matter what the title is. But I can then edit the alt text for that custom state in the Edit States window, right-clicking on the object and then bringing up the accessibility window. In this particular case, I decided to tell the alt text to say selected, use custom states. Once again, I encourage you to work with whomever will be testing the compliance, accessibility compliance on your course, because I've worked with testers that want the button name first, use custom states, and then the state after. So it would say use custom states selected. So in short, using custom states gives you the control not only on this version, but any versions that they put out going forward. Because it's a custom state and not their built-in state, your alt text will not change. The programming will not change. So all this leads up to JAWS. And what does JAWS say? What does that no or low vision learner hear when they are using the JAWS screen reader? And sorry, I couldn't resist but put in the Baby Shark reference there. So first of all, it reads alt text. We know that. That's why we're doing the alt text to begin with. But JAWS does not just read alt text, and that is okay. But it's important to understand what, in fact, it does read. So we mentioned that it reads advanced, I'm using air quotes, advanced punctuation such as a colon, em dash, quotation marks, bracket, and will read that to the learner. So if it is not necessary for the learning, remove it. As we mentioned earlier, using Notepad, great tool. And then keep in mind that it will insert an identifier. When I say an identifier, I mean it will, for example, for a graphic, it will say woman on computer with headset graphic. I didn't put graphic in the alt text, but it will add that to what is being read. Additionally, it will do the same for button. And a button is anything that the learner selects on the screen and it changes or does something. So I'm just going to take a step back really quick. So in thinking about this use custom states, notice it says selected use custom states. It'll say button. Not only will it say button, but it'll say select. It will give them instructions to select it. So you have to keep these things in mind when building your alt text. I would never have to add image of. I would just say woman on computer, or else it's duplicate, image of woman on computer graphic. I would never say use custom states button, because it would say use custom states button. And this really was trial and error, because not all objects get an identifier. 100% of the time, graphics and buttons do. And then it reads all items in the player window, not just the elements within the screen, if you will, within the course window. It reads the player elements, it reads the menu if you have it open on the left-hand side. It will read the resource tab. So you have to be aware that if the learner continues to circle around in a tab order, that it will read everything there. That's fine, but if you have several tabs and you have a transcript tab and you have everything, all the bells and whistles that Storyline does, keep in mind that the screen reader will read it every single time if the learner continues to tab through the screen. And then finally, a note about Storyline. Again, I have to reiterate, I love Storyline. It's my tool of choice. It's a journey for them. And they are taking the journey very, very seriously. The latest update, I feel like they took some steps forward, took a few steps back, because what happened is we've lost control as developers now over the order of all objects on the screen, because the screen reader now automatically reads all text block or your anything not interactive on the screen first, and then reads interactive elements based on the tab order. Blew my mind. I was thinking, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Because of the fact that we've now lost control over tab order. There's two things you can do. Number one, you can use workarounds, such as using interactive elements along with text. Not the best workaround. You can go back a couple versions of Storyline. I think it is the January version that you can go back to, because this wasn't implemented yet, or you can wait very patiently because they are working on it. It is, I'm going to use air quotes, an industry standard, accessibility industry standard, to allow the screen reader to read without the screen reader user having to navigate every single element on the screen. Great, that's wonderful. But to lose control over the ability to do it, especially if you have very interactive courses that you're trying to make accessible as much as possible, where all the text doesn't come at the top of the screen. There may be a text block and then an interactive element, or an image and then a text block and another interactive element. So we've lost a little control in the latest update. Again, they take feedback so well, and they really do try to move their product forward. And this has all been immediately, like I think within a day of the release, we were on there in one of the community forums talking about the loss of control. So be aware of what version of Storyline you're using, what update of Storyline, release of Storyline 360 you're using. And if it doesn't work for the latest release, go back a release or two and give it a try. That's the beauty of having this type of software, that we can utilize older releases. So with that, I want to thank you so much, and I would love to open it up to any questions.
Yeah, we definitely have some questions. Paul's keeping us
Okay,
busy with some questions. So I'll bring you back up on screen, okay?
you bet.
All right. So let's start with this first one. He asked this one earlier on. Does Jaws not like numbers or storyline not
Uh,
like it?
yeah, that's a great question. So I think it is somewhere in between. So if you have numbers, it will read, if I have the number 1 in a text block, just the number 1, like if I'm doing a step number, a numbered step list, it will read 1. But if it's in combination with any punctuation, any spaces, it tends not to read it. That being said, I think it might be a storyline issue, the way it communicates to, uh, or the way the screen reader reads the storyline code. How about that? So I think it's a combination of the two. So that's why I just blanketly say, why not spell it out in the alt text? It completely eliminates it. Hope that answered your question.
Awesome. Great. Okay, then Toddy is asking this one. Should we use plain text where possible, like RTF? Is that a best practice?
Yes, I would say it is definitely a best practice. Simplicity wins here. Not only in text, but also in design. Oftentimes with this accessibility, if you bring it back to the basics, the basic graphic design principles, lots of white space, not too much on the screen, it helps accessibility tremendously. But yes, basic text for sure.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So next question. This one's from Paul again. Let's see. Does storyline line add alt equals and then quotation marks when you leave it blank? I know for WCAG it should be this way when you have no alt text as opposed to no tag at all.
Okay, so this is where it gets a little tricky. So alt text is automatically added by Storyline. So any object that you put on the screen will have alt text, and it will be part of the output with something there until you deselect the um, checkbox in the accessibility window. Now, if you were to delete everything in the alt text and for some reason it stuck, because it usually just puts it back in if you delete it, but if it's stuck, then in the code it would be blank, alt text equals blank, but the screen reader wouldn't read anything. It would just be a focus onto something that it didn't read anything for, which would fail accessibility immediately. So
Awesome.
unlike a website, it's not that simple. You don't add alt text. Everything is already added for you. You delete it or change it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that one. Paul asking another question. Does it not just read the button text? Why would you want to have it read different button states? I'm not sure I understand the value. For example, you click on the button, select, it does something. What does state of the button matter?
Okay. Great question, actually. I questioned that myself. So if I am a non-visual learner and I always close my eyes thinking about it. I tab to a button. I select it by hitting my spacebar and I smash a key and it moves forward off that button. And I'm like, oh my gosh, did I select it? Did it work? And they have to either go backwards in the order or tab all the way around to that button again. And if it does not say that it's selected, they do not know that they've selected it. Now, this is very important when you have interactivities such as tabs or something where accordions. I'm trying to think of that's what I call them, but where you select an object or a button and it displays text. That text is not automatically read until the learner tabs to that text block. So I wouldn't know what I selected until I go back and I went off of it accidentally until I go back over it. So really it is a fail safe, because I as a non-visual learner can't tell that that button turned from green to white. There's no visual indicator for me to know that it was selected. It has to be an audio indicator.
Love it. Wow, this is just so fascinating. Even just for me, myself, trying to conceptualize it is, it's a challenge, but it's just something I've never thought of before. Paul's got a few more here. Hopefully I can read this aloud correctly, but he's asking, with a graphic that is clickable, would it then say alt text graphic button?
No, that's a great question. That if you turn a graphic into a button, let's just call it what it is, it no longer is a graphic to JAWS. It is now a button. So the alt text would end with button.
Wow. Okay. Gosh, Paul's got a few more in here, but one more. Is there a built-in skip button for the storyline player that lets you skip those items, or are there limitations?
A skip button. Not that I know of, I'm going to say. When you want to skip an item on the screen, you can remove it from the tab order. And again, that is a conversation, an hour-long conversation all in of itself. But that tab ordering is very important, and a very important part of accessibility. But you can remove things from the tab order so that it will, quote unquote, skip. I hope that was the question.
I think so. Great
Okay.
answers, all of these so far. Greg is asking this question, and it's a bit off topic, but have you heard anything about the state of accessibility with Articulate Rise?
Funny enough, you were to ask that. Much like I communicate to Articulate with storyline enhancements and questions and concerns, I also do that with Rise as well. And from what I understand, much like storyline, they are very focused on it becoming, quote unquote, more accessible, especially because I mentioned that storyline, it's a little gray area with e-learning of accessibility and how it compares to web accessibility. Rise is a different story altogether because it is essentially web accessibility. Responsive projects that can be considered a web page, quite frankly. So they are working to get more customizable accessibility, because right now it is not considered accessible, especially because you can't control different colors in different places, and their gray isn't the, for those of you who know Rise, if you use their built-in navigation for going from lesson to lesson, that isn't even accessible. It's the gray doesn't even pass accessibility when you come to visual contrast. So, but it is very responsive. Yes, Rise is incredibly responsive. It acts like HTML5, which is great. Now we just need to find the balance between how awesome that works and being fully accessible.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. And Paul's got a few more. I almost feel like I should invite him on screen. He's got so
I
many.
would say Paul and I are talking after this. Okay.
And he's asking regarding rich text. I guess that an earlier question, the rich text question. Let's see, but that doesn't cause a problem with screen jaws and storyline, does it? So wait, I'm trying to figure out which question. Maybe Paul, you can. Maybe is he talking about Paul? Are you referring to your jaws not like numbers, or which one? Maybe you can just type it. Okay, let's see. He says here in chat, sounds like use a different tool for responsive then if WCAG is important. Okay. The part where you said to not use rich text. So let me go over that question
Oh,
again. What's
oh
that?
no, you can use rich text.
Okay.
I'm sorry, no. My apologies. Let me take a step back. So you can use rich text. If you use, it's much more, you have to, how do I say this? There's more watch outs for rich text. There's more things you have to pay attention to.
I love it. I love that word watch outs. I don't think I've ever
Yeah,
heard that
watch
before.
outs. I don't know. Okay, maybe. um, so I noticed, Paul, though I gotchas. Yeah, gotchas. Paul, you also had mentioned about using a different tool than Rise for responsive projects. If WCAG AAA is required and your tester won't allow for product limitations or authorware limitations as reasons for not having something pass, then yes, you would have to look for something else for responsive projects, such as, dare I say, Adobe Captivate.
Interesting. Okay.
Mhm. I know. I knew he was going to say something about Captivate for some reason. Yeah.
All right, we've got a couple more here,
Okay.
and both from Paul. One more regarding states. So if you aren't using states for visual learners, then you really don't need to worry about states the way you described it.
If you're talking about button states, it, in my experience, again, my humble, my what I've learned from my accessibility testers, and I've worked mostly with external firms that specialize in accessibility, that button states are required. It's not a if you want to use them. So you have to let the visual learner know if they have selected something, or if you are using states for disabled or visited, same thing. So I only, I hate to say this, but I've kind of taken back my development to only use the on and off, normal, on state, because if I do use a visited and I do use a disabled, now I'm building all of this alt text into every single state, which is all customized.
Wow. Okay. Good one. All right. And looks like we got last question here from Paul. For WCAG, there is supposed to be a skip button that lets users skip standard nav. So it sounds like there isn't something there.
Oh, no, there is not. There is not a skip button for built into the code in Storyline. In fact, let me take that one step further. The use of the arrow keys, that is normal in web accessibility using JAWS. It's the tab key for Storyline courses. And that instruction, I generally have a how to use this course for screen readers at the beginning that would explain these differences that they may experience from their normal web accessibility.
Wow. Okay. This is great. I'm going to go ahead and come back on screen here. Um, Thank you for all of this, Susan. This has been amazing. I mean, that was a pretty comprehensive Q&A. Like, where do you have a place that you provide resources at all, or have you written any books, or what? How can people, you know, stay in contact with you?
Well, I've just joined the Slack group this morning,
Yeah.
so I am there. Definitely feel free to reach out. I took a hiatus from consulting for about 7 years
Mm,
and went full time with a very large health insurance company to develop their e-learning program there. I'm just now returning to the consulting world. It's been about a year, and I'm just now gathering my resources and getting back into, let's call it the swing of things, creating a blog and all that. So I will keep everyone posted, because I do love to share,
yeah.
and I'm always happy to have the conversation. So
Mhm.
I hope I hear from everyone.
Yeah, no, definitely. Keep us up to date on all of that. I'd love to be able to, to push people over to you as a resource.
Okay.
You've been fantastic today, and just thank you so much for sharing. Um, yeah, and with that said, any more questions? I think that we're gonna just wrap it up. It's been a great Friday, and if there isn't anything else, Susan, thanks again. Thank you so much. Everybody else, let's see. I think we've got Jean Maripodi coming up next week for the next episode of the accessibility playlist. I know Alan Not to Choose coming in. I think Karen North is going to come in and do one. We've got some other folks sort of just I've been talking to about bringing them on. So definitely more in this series. And until then, Susan, thanks one more time. We'll see you
Thank
guys next
you.
week.
Stay well, everyone.
All
Thank you
right.
so much.
Thank you.